It's Monday, April 3rd, and welcome to the reading of the Mansfield News Journal. My name is Pam, and we begin today's reading with the area deaths. Dr. Henry E. Aker, age 86, passed away peacefully at home on Wednesday, April 28th. The Akers family will receive guests Friday, May 7th from 4 to 7 p.m. in the Lexington Avenue Snyder Funeral Home. They request guests observe social distancing and mask requirements due to COVID-19. A funeral service honoring the life of Henry E. Akers will be held Saturday, May 8th at 10 a.m. in Mosaic, 296 Park Avenue West. Patrick A. Donahue, born July 17th, passed away on April 24, 2021. Born July 17, 1956. Per Patrick's wishes, the immediate family will have private services. Kathleen A. Fortney, age 52 of Mansfield, passed away on April 28th at Ohio Health Mansfield Hospital. Services have taken place. Imogene McNulty, 85 of Interlachen, Florida, passed away on Saturday, April 24th at Putnam Community Medical Center in Palatka, Florida. Due to concerns with COVID-19 virus, services and burial will be held privately for family and close friends. Lawrence R. Parsons, 82, passed away on April 26th at his residence. Public viewing will be held on Monday, May 3rd from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Marlon Gary Funeral Home, the Chapel of Peace, Mansfield, formerly Williams Funeral Services. Graveside service at 11 a.m. at Mansfield Cemetery. Alan N. Potts, 84, of Shelby, passed away at his home on Thursday, April 29th, after a long 44-year battle of MS. Family and friends may visit from 4 to 7 p.m. on Tuesday, May 4th, at the Diamond Street home of Wapner Funeral Directors. Funeral services will be held at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, May 5th, at the funeral home. Russell A. Warner, age 83 of Belleville, peacefully passed away Friday, April 30th at Avita Hospital in Ontario. Snyder Funeral Home's Belleville Chapel is honored to serve the family. And that concludes the area deaths available for today. So now we begin with our first article. County's COVID-19 case rate drops again by Monroe Trombley. The rate of people in Richland County contracting COVID-19 has declined to a level not seen since the first week of April. The number of new cases per 100,000 residents in the past 2 weeks, as of Thursday, dropped from 181 to 135, according to the state's Public Advisory System, or COVID-19 heat map. The incident rate for each county is shared each Thursday on the Ohio Department of Health's online dashboard. Richland County reported 163 cases in the last 2 weeks and has the 38th highest rate of Ohio's 88 counties, an improvement from last week when it had the 28th highest rate and the 19th highest the week before that. This week, Richland County triggered 3 of the Public Health Advisory System's 7 indicators, one less than last week. The one was hospital admissions for COVID-like symptoms. The indicators are used to determine which level denotes by color counties will be on the Ohio COVID-19 map. County remains red for the 19th straight week. Richland has been red, the system's second highest level, for 19 consecutive weeks, largely due to its high incident rate. The overall incident rate in Ohio is 155.6 cases per 100,000 residents, down from 185.8 on April 22nd, and down from 200 on April 15th. Governor Mike DeWine has promised to lift all health orders when the case rates drop to 50 per 100,000 residents. Coronavirus hospitalization rate drops. Virus-related hospitalizations in Richland County's hospital region also declined for the second consecutive week. On Thursday, there were 204 COVID-19 patients across 13 Northeast Ohio counties, including Richland County, according to the Ohio Hospital Association, down from 216 on April 15th. Richland County, as of Thursday, has recorded 11,214 cases, 104 since April 22nd, with 610 hospitalizations and 198 deaths since the beginning of the pandemic, according to the Ohio Department of Health. State of COVID-19 vaccinations in Richland County. By Thursday, 36,287 people, approximately 29.95% of the county's population, had received at least one shot of a COVID-19 vaccine, according to the state's online coronavirus dashboard, while 30,572 people are fully vaccinated. To compare, 35,471 people, approximately 29.28% of the county's population, had received at least one dose of the vaccine by April 22nd, while 28,340 were counted as fully vaccinated. Let's take a look at police discipline by Monroe Trombley. In Mansfield, the man had said he was going inside the house to fetch court papers, but he went in minutes ago and there was no sign of him. Mansfield police officer Matthew Davis was eventually told the man had run out the back door. "It's on the next time I see him," Davis was accused of saying. After being told of the apparent escape, Davis, a rookie policeman at the time, didn't immediately tell dispatch or his supervisor what happened, according to an internal affairs investigation. He also didn't search the Sackman Street house or the immediate area, nor did he ask other officers to help him set up a perimeter. In addition, Davis did not fill out a report detailing what happened. For that, he was suspended for 15 days in 2017. 16 pages of police discipline records obtained by the News Journal in public records requests showed that 17 officers and detectives, including Davis, were suspended between 2015 and February. Some were suspended more than once. The records obtained by the News Journal through public records request provide a glimpse of why and how often Mansfield police officers are suspended in an era of heightening scrutiny of policing. The records also show that arbitrators often overturn or reduce the length of a suspension when an officer protests their punishment. A 60-day suspension was trimmed to 10 earlier this year, for instance. Most suspensions are for lower-level offenses. But based on the documents provided to the News Journal, most suspensions since 2015 have been issued for low-level offenses. That includes dumping alcohol that was considered evidence, accidentally firing a gun after SWAT training, or calling off sick too many times. All suspensions are serious, no matter the offense, says Police Chief Keith Porch. If it rises to the level of suspension, it's a big deal in my mind, because you're losing pay, he said. Mansfield police officers have been suspended after being accused of sharing another officer's polygraphy results, crashing a cruiser, notifying family members of their loved one's death before the coroner did, and giving a defense attorney an audio recording of an arrest without giving it to the records section of the police department, according to internal affairs investigations. In the past 6 years, the Mansfield Division of Police has had anywhere from 76 to 82 sworn officers. The purpose of discipline is to salvage employees. In a phone interview, Porch, who served as an assistant chief for 5 years before he was named chief in 2019, called imposing discipline the ugly part of his job, but says it plays an important role. The main purpose of discipline is to correct bad behavior, inappropriate behavior, and to salvage the employees so we don't have those behaviors pop up again, Porch said. If they do, it's the next step up, which obviously could ultimately lead to termination. Davis, hired in 2014, has faced suspension multiple times and was close to being fired before he was offered a last chance agreement. 1 month before the Sackman Street incident, he was suspended for 3 days for failing to investigate a crash, which reportedly occurred near the end of his shift. Davis responded to the crash and left 13 minutes later without taking pictures or injuries or damaged vehicles, or collecting statements from drivers or witnesses, according to the internal affairs investigation. Skid marks were not documented, nor the fact that a motorcyclist had been ejected. Involved parties advised that they felt the officer did not properly or thoroughly investigate the crash and that they displayed a lack of concern for the investigation, the investigative document said. Davis ran afoul of departmental policy again when he refused to detain someone in 2017. He was being paid to appear in Mansfield Municipal Court, having been subpoenaed. A court staffer, seeing that Davis was in uniform, asked if he could take someone with a domestic violence warrant into custody. Davis refused, and the staffer asked another uniform officer, who did agree to detain the suspect. Davis apparently got Porch's message after some time. He hasn't had one suspension in the past 3 years, according to records obtained by the News Journal. In the last 6 years, I think the records speak for themselves, Porch said. There is no problem, no issues in policing ourselves. When discipline needs to be issued, it will be. Discipline is never a black and white area, as it's written on paper, he added. You want to correct behavior and salvage the employee. At the end of the day, if you can't do that, then you're left with no alternative other than terminating that employee's employment. Most officers suspended in 2015 haven't been punished multiple times. Unlike Davis, most Mansfield police officers slapped with a suspension since 2015 haven't been suspended multiple times. Officer Orlando Chapman, for instance, was suspended once in 2016 for 3 days for failing to find a gun on someone during a pat-down. After shift change, a loaded .356 Magnum pistol was found on the floor in the back of Chapman's cruiser. DNA testing concluded the gun belonged to a man arrested earlier that day by Chapman. Chapman, hired in 2006, had responded to a call about a disturbance. A victim told dispatch that a .357 Magnum pistol had been brandished. Chapman located a suspect, patted him down for weapon, and placed him in the cruiser unhandcuffed. Other officers arrived on the scene and spoke with the man, believing he had been properly searched. Wonder how police discipline works? Mansfield police officers, depending on the severity of the offense, typically receive warnings before being suspended. The Fraternal Order of Police, or the FOP, contract spells out that officers, if found to have violated department policy, first receive an oral reprimand, then a written reprimand, followed by a short-term suspension, followed by an even longer suspension, followed by a reduction in pay or rank, and then terminated. That's called progressive discipline. It's a rational attempt between management and frontline officers to create a system of punishment that can be predictable, that can try to correct behavior, that can recognize that employees make mistakes and need chances to improve their behavior in the future, says Stephen Rushin, an associate professor of law at Loyola University. Under the union contract, discipline must be consistent. To be suspended, the latest infraction has to be similar to the last. If I have a guy that keeps getting hit with unsatisfactory performance and then he calls off sick, that can't be used as progressive because of a sick leave issue, Porch said. Serious misconduct can result in an officer being suspended without receiving a reprimand, according to the contract. 5 have filed grievances. The documents obtained by the News Journal shows that officers sometimes appeal their punishment. Of the 17 officers and detectives suspended in the past 6 years, 5 filed grievances. Officer Jordan Moore, suspended for 60 days in October for dragging a seated, handcuffed teenager in a parking lot, filed a grievance on the first day of his suspension and claimed the lengthy suspension violated the progressive discipline clause of the union contract. Grievances are filed with an officer's supervisor and then passed up the chain of command. If the grievance can't be resolved by the Safety Service Director, the next step is arbitration. 2 weeks after Moore returned to work, the city, citing a recent arbitration decision unrelated to the dragging incident, trimmed his suspension to 10 days. Moore received 50 days of back pay. In the unrelated incident, Porch recommended a 3-day suspension after Moore was found to have cleaned up debris and put a stop sign back up without collecting evidence or taking pictures after responding to a hit-skip crash. He also completed a report that had inaccurate, false, or improper information according to a copy of the violation. But Moore filed a grievance against that suspension as well, claiming he had been suspended without just cause. The arbitrator agreed with Moore, and he received a written reprimand instead, which effectively nullified the long-term suspension. The city is satisfied with a long-term suspension of 10 days. As with any discipline, it is our hope that the behavior has been corrected and expected that it will result in no further violations, Safety Service Director Lori Cope said in a news release at that time. Other officers, besides Moore, have also been successful in getting a suspension trimmed on or their job back after filing a grievance and citing the progressive discipline clause of the union contract. 3-day suspension reduced to 1 day. Officer Corey Kaufman received a 3-day suspension last year after he grabbed a 16-year-old boy by the neck and he tried to get the teenager out of a cruiser. Officer Kaufman failed to give verbal warnings or use other approved means by the division in using force, a police investigator wrote in a report. Kaufman filed a grievance which did not go to arbitration and was instead resolved at the chief's level. This 3-day suspension was reduced to 1, with 2 days held in abeyance. Officer Freeman Nixon, fired in 2019 after he was accused of sharing a woman's polygraphy test results, got his job back 9 months later after an arbitrator ruled in his favor, reversing the termination. Nixon was instead suspended for 3 days and received 9 months of back pay, plus any income he earned during his time away from the police force. Russian, an associate professor of law at Loyola, has written extensively on the internal disciplinary process for police officers. In his research, Russian has heard police chiefs complain that progressive discipline can limit their ability to respond to misconduct or tie their hands in certain cases. To be clear, I don't think that in all cases that suggests that progressive discipline is a bad thing or the principle is bad. I think that's also raising a separate question about the appropriate standard of review for an arbitrator and the appropriate power we give someone on appeal to make those decisions. But I have heard that the adherence to progressive discipline, while rational and justified, can require departments to build extensive records of misconduct before you're able to actually take significant employment action against a public service, Russian said. A forthcoming study, authored by Russian, found that out of 624 arbitration awards issued between 2006 and 2020, arbitrators reduced or overturned discipline 52% of the time and ordered police departments to rehire previously terminated officers 46% of the time. A lot of procedures that I take issue with in the abstract and by themselves are by themselves perfectly rational, reasonable sounding procedures, Russian said. But in the aggregate, it can make it really hard to discipline somebody who has engaged in misconduct. Previous discipline can't be taken into account. Under the contract, oral, written reprimands and suspensions cease having effect after a certain period of time. For oral and written reprimands to not be considered when imposing discipline, police officers must be discipline-free for 1 year, according to the union contract. Officers are also allowed to request that oral or written reprimands not be considered after a discipline-free 8 months. For suspensions to not be considered when imposing discipline, officers must remain discipline-free for 2 years. As with reprimands, officers are allowed to request that suspensions of 3 days or less not be considered after a discipline-free 1 year and suspensions of more than 3 days after a discipline-free 18 months. The record of reprimands and suspensions, however old, is never removed from an officer's personnel file, according to Cope, the safety director. Police discipline records are not considered public records in most states. Ohio is one of perhaps a dozen where they are generally available to the public. Public access to records is limited in many states. It's not easy to get them in a lot of places, Rushin said. Police unions are pretty powerful political constituencies that have taken efforts to limit public access and transparency into the day-to-day lives of a work of police. In February, the News Journal filed a public records request with the city of Mansfield for a record of police officers suspended or fired between 2019 and February 2021, including whether discipline was modified, altered, or overturned. It was fulfilled 5 days later. But when a similar request was filed for officers suspended or fired between 2015 and 19, it was rejected by city officials who said discipline data dating back to 2015 was on a different software package. The city ultimately relented and provided the records, but only after Jack Grenier, the News Journal attorney, penned a letter to the law department. Our next article, Stepfather of Alexander Rios Reaches Out to Public Officials, by Lou Whitmire. Alexander Rios' stepfather, Don Mold, has reached out to about 24 public officials and congressional leaders in hopes someone can help him get answers surrounding his son's death. It's been a year and more than 212 days since Rios died after being forcefully subdued by correctional officers in an incident captured on video at the Richland County Jail. The jail incident occurred on September 19, 2019, and Rios died 8 days later at Ohio Health Mansfield Hospital when he was taken off of a ventilator. The Wakeman stepfather sent the packet via email to the News Journal on April 29th, to Lorain County Commissioners, Medina County Commissioners, and Richland County Commissioners, to 11 people in the 12th Congressional District, to Jim Jordan in the 4th Congressional District, to the Plain Dealer, and U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, Democrat for Ohio. The packet contains well-written letters Mold drafted and those responses he has received from involved parties, including public records he requested from the Ohio Bureau of Identification and Investigation and the Richland County Sheriff's Office's attorneys. It contains a News Journal story and the link to the video of the jail incident. Prosecutors say case can't be rushed. BCI and FBI investigating. As Forrest Thompson, the Medina County Special Prosecutor assigned to the case, said earlier, he told the man's stepfather he could not give him updates because it would be inappropriate, and stressed he would not rush the case. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation and the Federal Bureau of Investigation are conducting separate investigations. Last week, Thompson said in an email to the News Journal, "I'm unable to comment on the status of this matter at the present time," when asked about the investigation. Rios, 28, was arrested on September 18, 2019, at the Wakeman home of his parents, Don and Tony Mold, after a domestic incident involving an ex-girlfriend, and taken to the Mansfield jail on an outstanding warrant records show. The next day, the Richland County Sheriff's Office reported it was investigating an incident involving an inmate who had tried to commit suicide. The sheriff's office said the Hispanic father of 2 boys, who was not identified at the time, had been standing on a half wall in a holding cell, shouting to jail staff through a door window, and officers said they believed he was going to try to take his own life. Sheriff's Office video obtained earlier by the News Journal showed the entire incident, starting with correctional officers trying to enter Rios' cell to place him in a restraint chair. But when they opened the door, Rios bolted out, racing past the deputies who pursued him and tackled him in a nearby hallway. 8 days later, he would be dead, with the coroner ruling he died of excited delirium and noting he tested positive for amphetamines. Mold included in the packet a January 4 letter to Mold from Gary D. Bishop, Richland County Prosecutor, whose office is not handling the investigation. I sought the appointment of Mr. Thompson precisely because he has no affiliation with the Richland County Sheriff of the Richland County Jail, and because I know him to be a person of honesty and integrity, Bishop said in the letter to Mold. Mr. Thompson has a strong legal mind and a true moral compass. I trust his judgment in this matter implicitly. He pointed out while a year-long investigation is no doubt frustrating for Mold and his family, it is nevertheless not uncommon in such cases. Many questions, no answers. Mold respectfully included his thoughts from April 23, 2021, including bulleted statements such as, "Are all involved parties from the jail still employed at the jail? And have any of the 6 CO correction officers in the released information indicted if put on leave? Discipline noted in personnel files? Any other disciplinary action of the incident?" J.C. Ratliff, who represents Rios' stepfather and mother, sent a copy of the letter he sent to Brown. The video footage of the ruthless force and violence of the correctional officers is shocking and damaging. For several minutes, 5 large men, including at least one supervisor, pile on top of Alex while he is restrained in a prone position, even after he ceases offering anything that could arguably be considered resistance to these correctional officers, Ratliff wrote the senator. The officers applied direct and excessive force to Alex's upper body long after they had him completely under their control, Ratliff said in the letter. They tased him several times with 2 different tasers and punched and struck him, including strikes to his head. A female officer stood by, not only failing to intervene, but also yelling for officers to tase Alex, even as Alex is calling out that he is not fighting. Alex struggles to breathe until he stops. In the interest of justice and fairness, Ratliff told Brown in the letter, "It's been 19 months, and the investigation into the conduct of the correctional officers of the Richland County Jail remains pending. As far as we know, the correctional officer who killed Alex have not been disciplined, fired, retained, or charged." Ratliff concluded his letter to Brown asking, in the interest of justice and fairness, that the death of Rios be investigated by a federal agency such as the Department of Justice. Mold thanked in advance everyone for their time and consideration on this matter. If you watch the video in the link that I have provided and feel that we are overreacting, please disregard this package. Alex would have been 30 years old on May 8th, 2021. Madison Local Schools cut staff size by Monroe Trombley. Facing looming budget deficits, Madison Local School has decided to reduce the size of its staff. 14 teaching positions are being cut and 8 will be added, resulting in a net loss of 6 positions. Decisions to eliminate some positions while adding others is based on enrollment, according to Rob Peterson, district superintendent. For example, the district is adding a science position at Madison Comprehensive High School after more students opted to take science next year, and eliminating a first grade position due to a smaller class size. There are needs in the district that change from year to year, Peterson said. 2 intervention specialists added. Peterson, who became superintendent in August, also noted that 2 intervention specialist positions are being added. "I believe we've been a little short-handed when it comes to intervention specialists," Peterson said. "Changes in personnel will become effective at the end of this school year." Talks of cuts first arose in January when Peterson told board members the district had projected deficits of $1.25 million in fiscal year 2021. $1.9 million in 2022, and a negative cash balance in 2023. In the state of Ohio, school districts cannot go into a negative balance, Peterson said at the time. "We need to reduce expenditures, that's very important, and one way of doing that is to reduce staff." As part of the reduction in force, or the RIF, process, Peterson said positions the district intended to eliminate were shared with leadership of the Madison Local Education Association, or the MLEA, which represents the majority of the district's 234 teachers. If there's any position that they determine that they don't believe meets the negotiated agreement language regarding an RIF, they can address those, Peterson said. There was no position that they challenged. Can bump those with less seniority. Displaced staffers have the option of bumping those with less seniority out of lower positions. They can also move into a position once held by someone who recently retired or resigned. If a teacher is not licensed for an open position or they are unable to bump someone, their name is placed on a recall list, according to Peterson. Ultimately, if there's no job for somebody, I recommend to the board that we suspend their contract, Peterson said. So the people whose contracts are being suspended has yet to be determined. Peterson said all reductions aside from 2 were based on low enrollment numbers. 4 non-teaching positions also have been eliminated, according to Peterson. And that concludes the Mansfield News Journal for today. My name is Pam. Thank you for having me into your home. Please be safe till we meet here again. And as always, I wish you abundant blessings.